Sam Brumby's back scullery. The place was filthy. Unwashed pots and pans were piled in the sink, and bits of mouldy food littered the draining board. Sam Brumby was standing at the kitchen table, hacking at a lump of fat bacon. He glanced up. "You still here?" Esther eyed the food hungrily. "Sit down and eat." He threw her a wedge of meat and a hunk of coarse bread. "Then you can be on your way, wench." "Thank you, Mr. Brumby." She sat at his table and ate the food he offered. When she'd finished, she thanked him again, stood up and left the house. But she did not leave the farm. If Sam Brumby wanted her gone, he'd have to carry her off his land. She had nowhere else to go. Not now. Esther had walked away from the only home she'd ever known, leaving the village on the edge of the wolds that had been her home for the first 16 years of her life. She'd left without a trace of sorrow. There was no one she'd really miss, certainly not her Aunt Hannah. When she saw Sam come out of the back door and go towards the barn, Esther collected the milk and carried it back to the house. By the time Sam returned, she was pouring the milk into a spotless separating bowl. "Thought I told you to go," he said. "Just thought I'd do this for you, Mr. Brumby. After all, this is woman's work. I'm sure there's something else waiting that needs a man's brawn." "Cheeky young wench," he growled, before turning away. Esther went outside again. She saw Sam disappearing into the cowshed. She stood outside the back door of the house and looked about her. Just how, she asked herself, was she going to get this stubborn old man to admit that he needed help about his farm? Her help. Across the yard were some stables, the cowshed, and a barn. On the right was a row of brick pigsties and a tool shed. Already the sun was setting, throwing shafts of golden light across the fields that stretched westward. As dusk closed in, the tiredness swamped her. She hadn't slept for over 36 hours. Her body ached to lie down and rest. She stood uncertainly, breathing in the soft air with a hint of the sea in it. The barn and its hayloft promised warmth and rest. She glanced back over her shoulder. Let him struggle tonight, she thought, but tomorrow I'll show him. Esther smiled to herself and went towards the barn. She became aware of early morning light filtering through the cocoon of hay she'd made for herself. There was a rustling close beside her. Without warning, the sharp tines of a pitchfork were driven into the hay inches from her throat. She flung back the hay covering her and scrambled to her feet. A young man stood there, open-mouthed. "What the hell? Be more careful with that thing. You nearly speared me neck." "You shouldn't be here," he retorted defensively, then grinned as his gaze travelled down her lithe body. "Oh, I don't know, though." Esther stood her ground. He was no taller than she was, the width of his shoulders proclaiming their muscular strength. He wore an open-necked shirt with a kerchief knotted at his throat. His trousers were the usual corduroy with a length of twine tied below each knee. His cap perched uneasily on top of his curly black hair, and his skin was swarthy. His brown eyes glinted as their gaze rested on the gentle swell of her bosom. He grinned, put out his hand to touch her throat where the top button of her blouse was undone. It'd be a pity to wound such a lovely neck as... Her arm came up smartly to smack his hand away. "Keep your hands to yourself, boy!" With that, she climbed down the ladder. As Esther sluiced the sleep from her eyes under the icy water from the pump, she heard behind her the clatter of hooves and turned to see Sam bringing his cows towards the cowshed. As he passed her, he said, "What sort of time do you call this? I thought the work would be too much for a slip of a wench. What do you want me to do, Mr. Brumby?" He turned to look at her. "You can get on with milking this pair." He began to go towards the house. "I'm off up top end. I'll be back by your done." There was no further sign of the boy. Who was he, Esther wondered. Just as she was finishing milking the two cows...